because we now know who all the prosecutors will be on Diddy's trial. They're all women. They have assembled a team of female prosecutors, and that is definitely not by accident.
Today in a New York federal courtroom, Sean Diddy Combs told the judge he was, quote, a little nervous. The rap mogul's criminal trial began this morning. He is trafficking, racketeering, and more.
The courtroom buzzed with an electric tension, the kind of charged atmosphere where every rustle of paper hit like an explosion, and every whispered word echoed like a shout. Sean Diddy Combs, the man who built an empire fueled by charisma, talent, and an uncanny knack for reading a room, now sat at the eye of a storm he could no longer command. His empire was no longer admired. It was being dissected, scrutinized for every flaw, every crack, every dark secret he had spent years burying. But today was far from an ordinary day in what had already become one of the most high-profile trials in recent memory. Today, the prosecution held something that could completely redefine the entire case. Before moving forward, it's important to note one missing piece: witness number 3. The prosecution still can't locate her. Reportedly, an ex-girlfriend of Diddy's, one of the alleged victims. At first glance, Diddy appeared composed, but anyone paying close attention could spot the strain, the tightening of his jaw every few seconds, his fingers tapping a relentless rhythm on the table as if fighting to keep control. His legal team, a group of the sharpest, highest-paid minds, sat close by, whispering urgently, yet even they seemed tighter than usual. Across the room, the prosecution was nearly serene. Their lead attorney held a flash drive with the confidence of someone about to drop a bombshell. The judge gave her the nod, and with sharp, commanding authority, she announced the government's intention to present new evidence, an audio recording. The courtroom stirred at the mention, but the real shock was yet to come. She revealed the recording contained testimony from Christian Combs. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Christian Combs, Diddy's son. The judge quickly called for order, but the impact of the revelation was already undeniable. Gasps, hurried whispers, even audible expletives filled the room as everyone absorbed the weight of the announcement. The defense sought to question potential jurors after they completed their questionnaires. Had they seen any news coverage, documentaries, anything relating to the case? Had Christian's name surfaced in their minds before? From filling out questionnaires to jury selection Monday morning, Christian's presence had lingered in the shadows. Mentioned only in passing, a figure many assumed would stay silent. Now, he was center stage. His voice, the very thing that could shatter his father's defense, filled the courtroom as the prosecutor pressed play. It was steady, deliberate, and heavy with the weight of someone who had agonized over what he was about to say. Christian began by describing moments only someone deeply familiar with Diddy's inner circle could know about. Private gatherings held behind the walls of grand mansions, far from prying eyes, where every guest list was crafted with ruthless precision. According to Christian's testimony, these weren't mere parties. They were carefully orchestrated productions. He described an atmosphere dripping with exclusivity, yet dominated by control. Attendees knew the unspoken rules. No cameras, no phones, no questions asked. Christian went further, explaining how certain guests arrived escorted by intermediaries, often accompanied by envelopes full of cash handed out afterward. Silence. Money, as he called it. In her civil lawsuit, Cassie accused Diddy of abuse and assault. But Christian didn't stop there. He painted a chilling picture of loyalty not just expected, but demanded. He alleged that his father's inner circle operated like a machine, with Diddy at the helm, controlling every move. Even family wasn't immune. Christian detailed overheard conversations warning people about the consequences of crossing Diddy. He always made sure people knew he could make or break them, Christian said in the recording, his voice heavy with resignation and bitterness. The recording also exposed suspicious financial dealings. Christian claimed he'd seen spreadsheets listing payments to various individuals. some of whom were later told to keep their stories straight when questioned by others. He spoke of private flights, not just for business or leisure, but for purposes deliberately vague. Everything had a purpose, and it was always Diddy's purpose. A U.S. judge has ruled that rapper and producer Sean Diddy Combs will face trial on federal trafficking and racketeering charges. He'll remain in prison until the trial in May. Diddy has pleaded not guilty to accusations that he used his business empire to traffic women and male workers across state lines for recorded performances. If convicted, he could face life in prison. Diddy's reaction to the recording was immediate and intense. At first, he sat frozen, face pale, eyes fixed on the table before him. His attorneys leaned in, whispering urgently, but he didn't respond. As Christian's testimony grew more specific, naming dates, locations, even people, something in Diddy snapped. He abruptly pushed his chair back, the screech echoing, through the courtroom and stood. His face was a mask of fury and disbelief. Gesturing wildly toward the speakers, he declared it a setup and accused his own son of lying. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters scrambled to capture every moment, fingers flying over keyboards, cameras flashing like strobes. Spectators whispered frantically, shock written across their faces. The judge repeatedly struck her gavel, demanding order. But Diddy wasn't done. He yelled that they did not. Diddy yelled that nobody knew what they were doing, that this was his family, his life. His lawyers tried to calm him down, but it was already too late. U.S. Marshals stepped in, gripping his arms firmly and escorting him out of the courtroom. The doors closed behind him with a heavy finality, leaving the room in stunned silence. Quick side note, all that commissary stuff? Yeah, he's not getting any of that. People in the SHU have a strict abbreviated list. No stake for him. He's on watch. This guy thought he'd be going home, but suddenly that bond didn't come through. Remember the very first night he was locked up? Outside, the media frenzy was already at full throttle. News vans lined the streets, reporters jostled for position, delivering breathless updates to eager audiences. Social media exploded. Hashtags like Daichiu's Diddy Breakdown and Idihaichiu Christian Speaks, trending within minutes. Fans and critics alike weighed in, opinions as polarized as ever. Some hailed Christian as a hero, brave enough to tell the truth. Others slammed him as a traitor, questioning his motives and speculating about deals with prosecutors. But that recording? It was only the beginning. Behind the scenes, whispers of more evidence began to surface. Sources close to the case hinted at additional recordings, emails, even financial documents, all capable of further unraveling the carefully crafted image of Diddy's empire. Rumors swirled that other family members might be called to testify, that this was just the tip of a massive iceberg. And then there were the lawsuits, dozens of them, each adding a new layer to the tangled web of allegations. Now, onto the latest about Sean Diddy Combs' arrest. This story has everyone talking. The disgraced music mogul faces federal racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking charges. Both prosecution and defense are gearing up for the next phase following the indictment, as investigators dig deeper to identify possible co-conspirators. But how did it all come to this? One particularly damning civil suit, filed by a former employee, claims Diddy's company ran on a culture of fear and secrecy. The plaintiff alleges employees were often forced into signing NDAs, and those who refused were quickly and quietly replaced. Another suit, filed by a woman known only as Victim 3, details alleged manipulation and intimidation, painting a chilling portrait of a man who used his power to silence anyone who dared to speak out. As the judge adjourned the session, the weight of everything that had just happened hung thick, in the air. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was an unmasking, a public dissection of a man who had spent decades building an image of invincibility. The cracks were undeniable. The walls were closing in fast. The question now wasn't if Diddy's empire would fall. It was how much of it would collapse and who else might get caught in the wreckage. The courtroom slowly emptied, but the whispers from those inside carried one unspoken truth. There was still more to come. This investigation is far from over, and I urge anyone with information about this case to step forward and do it fast. But this isn't just about a son's betrayal anymore. The courtroom drama is just the surface of a much bigger, darker story. A tangled web so vast it could trap half of Hollywood if someone pulled hard enough. Behind the scenes, whispers have grown into roars. What once were rumors about Diddy's unchecked power and the toxic culture he built are now fully exposed, piece by piece, through lawsuits, testimonies, and a mounting pile of evidence. This paints a chilling picture of a man who didn't just bend the rules. He rewrote them completely. And the worst part? He had plenty of help. For years, Diddy's empire operated not just as a business, but as a fortress designed to protect its king at all costs. His record label, brand partnerships, sprawling network of lawyers, publicists, and enablers, they were all part of a machine built to keep the truth buried. Non-disclosure agreements were as common as contracts. According to multiple lawsuits from former employees and insiders, one former staffer in a suit filed just last year described how new hires were forced to sign NDAs so strict they couldn't even mention the weather if it was seen from one of Diddy's properties. The judge and the government didn't dive too deep into the plea offer's details, but one thing was clear. Under the plea deal, Diddy would face less time than if he went to trial. During the allocution portion, Diddy stood up as the judge read him everything he needed to hear, assessing whether he was of sound mind, aware of the charges, and the consequences ahead. It wasn't just staff who were silenced. Several lawsuits revealed a disturbing pattern of hush-money payouts to people threatening to expose damaging stories that could tarnish Diddy's carefully crafted image. 1. Case filed in California accused a former associate of receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars to retract claims about questionable dealings at Diddy-hosted events. The plaintiff alleged the money came with a binding agreement that essentially erased their ability to ever speak on the matter again. Pure hush money, plain and simple. But until now, the courts never officially called it that. Then came the 2024 lawsuit filed by a former bodyguard who'd worked for Diddy for over a decade. In his testimony, he described a culture of paranoia, alleging he was often ordered to follow people who had fallen out of Diddy's favor, tracking their every move and reporting back. He claimed part of his job was delivering warnings, subtle at first, but escalating if the person didn't comply. The lawsuit also alleged Diddy had ordered surveillance on former employees who left the company, making sure they stayed silent. What made this case explosive? The bodyguard said he had proof, emails, GPS data, backing up Diddy's efforts to control every corner of his empire. Some thought Diddy might throw his celebrity friends under the bus, and that could still come when it's time for court and testimony. But right now, it's clear just how crucial public relations are to Sean Combs. He's desperately trying to control the story from behind bars, letting his attorneys handle documentaries and media spins. Another lawsuit from a former executive assistant added even more fuel to the fire. The assistant claimed they had overheard countless private conversations where Diddy openly talked about handling problems with payouts and legal threats. One particularly damning detail: the assistant said they were ordered to shred documents and delete digital files tied to hush money payments mentioned in other cases. They also alleged they were fired after hesitating to follow through, a clear act of retaliation for refusing to play along. Diddy's legal team called these claims nothing more than bitter fabrications from a disgruntled employee. But the lawsuit raises serious questions. Just how far is this mogul willing to go to bury his secrets and keep the empire intact? Then there were the guests, the people who found themselves inside Diddy's world, often without truly knowing what they were stepping into. Multiple lawsuits from various individuals described a culture of exclusivity so intoxicating, people would do almost anything just to stay inside that circle. One woman, filing anonymously in New York, claimed she was flown to a private island under the guise of attending a business event. But what she found instead, according to her lawsuit, was an atmosphere steeped in control and fear. Phones were confiscated upon arrival, conversations monitored, and leaving wasn't even presented as an option. She alleged that attendees were carefully watched, their every move scrutinized, with compliance either rewarded or punished. You might think it's coincidence, but it's not, especially given the nature of the case when you look at who's examining these witnesses, particularly the 4 alleged female victims. But it wasn't only these private events raising eyebrows. Behind every headline-making moment in Diddy's career, there seemed to be a darker story lurking beneath. Take his infamous parties, for example, the legendary gatherings in the entertainment world. Extravagant, opulent, and exclusive, sure, but lawsuits and insider accounts painted a far more sinister picture. One former attendee, who later turned whistleblower, described them as theatrical productions designed to showcase Diddy's power. Everything was choreographed, from who stood where to who was allowed to approach him. It wasn't just about having fun, it was about control. Then came the allegations about how Diddy maintained that control. Multiple lawsuits suggested a pattern of intimidation far beyond mere words. One chilling account came from a former business partner who claimed Diddy had once threatened to ruin them if they didn't fall in line. The lawsuit detailed how this person's career was systematically dismantled after refusing to comply with one of Diddy's demands. And as more people began to speak out, the picture only grew clearer. The pattern became clear. It wasn't just that Diddy was powerful. His power came at a cost, and that cost was paid by everyone who got too close. Yet for years, none of this ever surfaced. Why? Because the system wasn't built just to protect Diddy. It was built to protect itself. From the lawyers drafting the NDAs to the executives turning a blind eye to rumors, the entire industry seemed complicit in guarding his secrets. This is hugely significant, especially considering who we associate with Diddy and everything we've seen from him over the decades. Like you said, this is a massive downfall, going from mansions raided by the feds back in March to now sitting in a jail cell. It really highlights the enormity of what he's facing and the full weight of the federal government's case. But now, the cracks in the facade are impossible to ignore. The lawsuits are piling up, the testimonies harder to dismiss, and the public is asking questions that no PR spin can dodge. How had Diddy managed to avoid accountability for so long? Who else knew what was happening behind closed doors? And perhaps most importantly, why are people only speaking out now? Some say the timing isn't a coincidence. As the entertainment industry reckons with its history of power abuse and exploitation, Diddy's empire became an easy target. Others argue it's deeper than that. They point to the growing number of insiders turning against him, including those once considered untouchable. Christian's testimony was only the start. Whispers say more family members might come forward, more recordings might exist, and the worst is yet to come. And on defense attorneys, initially we thought there was just one. But 2 defense attorneys have been in the courtroom the whole time. When Brian Steele joined, Nicole Westmoreland also appeared. Then there are the financial stakes. If the lawsuits keep mounting, Diddy's empire could face ruin, not just in public opinion, but financially. Several of his business ventures are rumored to be under partner review, and at least one major brand has quietly distanced itself recently. Insiders say if the trial goes as prosecutors hope, Diddy might lose not only his freedom, but everything else. Even as the walls close in, questions remain. How deep does this conspiracy Go, is Diddy the mastermind of his downfall, or just a player in a bigger game? What about the lawyers, executives, publicists who helped him? Will they face consequences? Or will they just move on to the next powerful figure guarding the next secret? As for the missing witness, her attorney says she may not even be willing to testify. So, as the trial moves forward, one thing is clear. This isn't just about Diddy anymore. It's about an entire industry that lets someone like him thrive. It's about the systems protecting the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. And it's about those finally brave enough to speak up, even when risking everything. So, what do you think? Is Diddy's empire collapsing under its own secrets? Or is this just the start of a much bigger fallout? And what about those who stood by him all these years? Should they be held accountable too? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's see where this story goes next. Until then, stay tuned. This one's far from over.